Hey everybody, it's Mike Sullivan with Born to Shine. We have an awesome guest today. She's the superintendent over in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and her name is Meg Van Fossan. Meg, thanks for carving out some time with us today.
It's great to have an opportunity to speak with you. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, likewise. And I found you, Meg, I think it was even like a Google alert that said schools that are, putting mental health first. And I was like, right on. Meg is ahead of the curve. This is so cool to see a superintendent. And I'm seeing more and more of these that are putting mental health first to support the kids. This is off the cuff, but what actually prompted that? I know we didn't talk about this before, but is that okay to just throw a little curveball in there?
Yeah, that's it's a perfect segue. So I served as a special services, special ed, people services director for over 20 years.
Wow.
And for kids to be able to tackle what we ask them to tackle in public schools, that rigorous, relevant educational experience, they've got to be whole. We've got to think about the whole child. And one of the things that I think we miss frequently are those kids that suffer in silence, those kids that have anxiety and depression, and they're timid and they don't feel loved and welcomed, and they feel like they're a cast off, whatever, term that you want to use. Different kids label their belongingness in different ways. And so do staff, quite frankly. So that was, for me as a superintendent and, quite frankly, as a student services director for many years, we need to serve all kids well. And that is what we're here to do. And we have a lot of initiatives. We are a turnaround district here, been identified by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So we've really rethought the widget. We've really rethought how we design educational experiences in an educational environment for kids. So they need to be at the forefront of our decision making instead of the adults, right? Oftentimes systems are built around adults instead of who it is they should serve, and that's kids.
That's awesome. Well, and you have all those decades of experience. So that's really, really, that's cool. That's awesome that you have that insight and all of those years of experience. And then, when you were a kiddo, Meg, was there anything that you struggled with? Like for me, I was bullied, and that just exacerbated the anxiety that I had a predisposition for in my family lineage, and then some depression. And I was in third grade. They were big feelings for a little kid. I didn't understand them. And there was virtually no support in school. We had a school psychologist and a counselor. And as I mentioned earlier, I love them and have tons of admiration and respect for them. But I just felt like I needed more. And it really made going to school difficult. Was there anything that you may have struggled with when you were a kiddo in K-12?
Oh, for sure. I was an overweight kid. We walked to school and I remember being called names.
Mm.
I also really struggled with learning to read, and certainly even today, my writing. And so, with all of that said, all of that comes with emotion, right? And
Mhm.
I'm old. I tell kids all the time, when dinosaurs walked the earth is when I was born, and they always chuckle and laugh. But back then, the reality is there was a tremendous, it wasn't a conversation we had, there was a tremendous stigma to mental health.
Mhm.
We didn't talk about it in K to 12. We didn't know who psychologists were. If you had a school counselor, quite frankly, I don't even remember visiting that office or that school
Mhm.
counselor coming in and even doing classroom presentations. I was in a public school as well as a Catholic school during my early years. And again, there was such stigma, it just wasn't a conversation. And so folks internalized that. So as a school leader and as a district leader, I wanted to ensure that all kids felt welcomed and that's, if, I come to school every day, and there's 10 things I think about right out of the bat, and is how do I keep students and, staff safe? We shouldn't have to think about that in this country. Right. And then that next, checklist is how do we make kids feel loved, and how do we make their experience joyful? Kids don't work hard for teachers they don't like, and teachers don't work hard for building principals and superintendents they don't like. So it starts with meaningful relationships every single day. We have to value the voice of kids, at the same time, the voice of staff, right? So that they have the tools to build or design environments that are safe for kids.
I love how you said that, Meg, that you want to make your kids feel loved. I mean, who doesn't love that, right? Who isn't going to respond positively to that, or well, and reciprocate, right? The whole law of reciprocity. Like, you're showing your students that you care about them, and you're showing your staff that you care about them. You're showing the principals, everyone, and they're going to want to do their best for you. That's just natural reciprocity, and they're in it. Just even the way you said it, I mean, I felt the warmth, I felt the authenticity, and it's a real, not just blowing sunshine your way. It's refreshing, because you're right. It is a shame and kind of disturbing that we have to even worry or think about our physical safety, but we do. But then there's the psychological safety that is the invisible component. And that's where you making a priority for kids to feel loved and to feel welcomed and to feel cared for, and that they matter, that their voice matters. That's just huge. So that's awesome. And I forgot the first question. Forgive me. What was your journey like to become the superintendent? You kind of hinted on it in the first part but what was that
So
like?
I'm an Ohio State Buckeye. I'm very proud of being an Ohio State Buckeye. I was part of the internship program. There were 5 of us accepted at Ohio State into the athletic training internship. I love caring for people.
Mm-hmm.
Way back when, again, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, females were not athletic trainers in Division I schools for the most part, or in professional sports. So at that point, you chose athletic training, but you had to have another major, and I chose special education. And I have been truly blessed through this life, having the opportunity to serve and support kids in many, many, many different ways. I served as a teacher in Columbus Public Schools. I worked in South America on World Bank projects and Inter-American developmental projects. I worked at a university where it was actually the first undergraduate liberal arts program in the country. They wrote a new constitution. So it was a wild ride, and I loved every minute of it. Came back to the States, lived in Washington, D.C., and actually it was the Autism Resource Center for the Commonwealth of Virginia. My husband then came to Pittsburgh, and I became a student services director. So I've been a little bit here and, a little bit everywhere, but, for actually 14 years as a student service director at a district close to Pittsburgh. And, my final landing spot, and then my hope is I'll retire from Stowe Rocks. This is truly the best job I've ever had. I love, you have a great job when you don't have to have an alarm to get you up in the morning, right? Um, we are a small district. We have a great deal of community violence. In fact, last year, the FBI identified our area as the most dangerous in the Commonwealth. 92% of my kids live in homes that are below the poverty line. And so when we come to work every single day, we have to support kids in many, many, many ways, lots of food insecurity and housing insecurity and not having electricity and, all of the basic needs we have to ensure we've designed for. We have a tremendous amount of supports and services for mental health. We have social emotional programming for K-8 that is part of every child's schedule, and we do that every single week. In terms of tier two and tier three, we again have masters in, MSWs, we have LPCs, we just have lots and lots of mental health because of the needs of my kids. Um,
Awesome.
so we really do, our staff are amazing. They're not here for the money, let me tell you that. And it's very heavy lifting and emotional work here. And I oftentimes worry about the secondary trauma of my staff. And we do have a therapist that will serve students and staff that actually take our health insurance. So if you want to come in earlier, if you want to see them during your lunch, or you want to see them during your prep, you can see a therapist right here in the school district, as staff members, as well as we have lots of services for kids as well and families. Like we do a lot of connecting moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles so that they are whole, right? So that their needs are met as well. Because oftentimes in these types of communities, unfortunately, there's not a plethora of mental health support. So oftentimes we're the ones who make those connections for the family.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so critical. And it's great that you're doing that not only for your students, but your staff and for your students' parents. So you're really supporting
Yeah.
the whole community. That's really awesome. And if there's anything that's on your heart that you just, wish, hey, I wish you would have asked that. I wanted to share that. This it's all the stage is yours. Parting words, final advice, maybe some wisdom, anything you'd want to share with someone that's listening that's either a student struggling or maybe a parent that's struggling or maybe an admin, any of the above, whatever's on your heart.
I know and the past that it was the ABCs and one, two, threes. It's got to be much, much more today. It does start with relationships. It is about healing communities, and school districts can be that um, starting point. It can be that hub. We really have to rethink how we go about educating kids in this country. We really need to be there needs to be communities in the schools, right? We can't be fighting against one another. There's so much partisanship. It's heartbreaking, and legislators are spending a lot of time fighting each other instead of fighting for what's important, and that's the education of tomorrow's youth
Yeah.
and today's youth.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, 100% agree. I think no, you said it best. I'm not even going to add anything. That's great. Thank you so much, Meg, for what you do and for the heart that you bring in to your district. I mean, it's palpable. I can feel it. It's oozing out of you, and everything you're saying, it's obvious. You really do care about your kids, and it's just really amazing how the adversities we go through on a personal level can really fuel us to support other kids that are going through a tough time too. And it just really, it just shows how much you want to support your kids, make them feel loved, make them feel safe, and that they matter and they're important. And I just really appreciate you for that. Thanks, Meg.
Thanks for inviting me to join you today.